I inherited my grandparents' estate and quietly put it in a trust. Then my mom and brother showed up with a fake will, claimed they'd taken my house and ordered me out by Friday. I let them return with movers because my lawyer and a deputy were waiting. Some of you might find this hard to believe, but honestly, after living with my family for 28 years, nothing they do surprises me anymore. My name is Jake, and this is the story of how my brother Oliver and my mother tried to steal a $900,000 inheritance from me, and how spectacularly it backfired. To understand this mess, you need to know about my family dynamics. I'm the older son at 28, and Oliver is 26. Growing up, it was always crystal clear that Oliver was the golden child. He was the athlete, the charmer, the one who could do no wrong in Mom's eyes. I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades, quietly worked part-time jobs, and generally tried to stay out of trouble. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Oliver made JV football as a freshman, Mom threw him a party and invited half the neighborhood. When I made honor roll 3 semesters in a row, she bought a cake from the grocery store and said, "Good job," while scrolling through her phone. When Oliver got his driver's license, Dad let him drive the good car to school. When I got mine 6 months later, I had to save up for 3 months to buy a beat-up Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it. Dad passed away when I was 16 from a sudden heart attack, and that's when Mom's favoritism toward Oliver really kicked into overdrive. She'd openly say things like, "Ol needs more support because he's going through a difficult time," even though we were both grieving the loss of our father. The difference was, I grieved quietly while working extra shifts at my part-time job to help with household expenses. Oliver grieved loudly while spending money we didn't have on video games and nights out with friends. When Oliver crashed Dad's car at 17 while drunk, yes. Drunk driving at 17, Mom paid for the repairs without question and told him, "Accidents happen, sweetheart." The car needed $4,000 worth of bodywork. When I got a small dent in her car from a parking lot incident at 18, completely sober and completely accidental, I had to work extra shifts at my grocery store job for 2 months to pay for the $800 repair myself. The pattern continued through college. Mom co-signed loans for Oliver to attend a private university where he majored in partying and minored in business. She paid for his fraternity dues, his spring break trips to Cancun, even helped him with rent when he was between jobs for months at a time, which happened frequently because he kept getting fired for not showing up. Meanwhile, I worked my way through state school, taking out student loans in my own name and living on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I had 3 part-time jobs tutoring math students, working at a campus computer lab, and doing weekend shifts at a local restaurant. Not that I'm bitter about it. It actually taught me the value of money and hard work, lessons that would serve me well later, but it stung watching Mom beam with pride when Oliver barely graduated with a 2.3 GPA while treating my 3.8 GPA and computer science degree like it was expected rather than accomplished. My saving grace through all of this was my grandparents, Mom's parents. Grandpa Joe and Grandma Ruth were incredible people who saw right through Mom's favoritism from day one. They made sure to treat Oliver and me equally when we were kids, but as we got older and our personalities became more apparent, they started to see the real differences between us. I'd spend summers at their house starting when I was 12, helping Grandpa with his woodworking projects in his garage workshop and learning about investments and financial planning from him during our evening talks on the back porch. He was a retired accountant who'd done very well for himself through smart investing, careful saving, and what he called not being stupid with money. Grandpa had started with nothing. His parents were Depression-era farmers who lost everything when their crops failed 3 years running. He put himself through college, working nights at a factory, became a CPA, and slowly built wealth through disciplined saving and conservative investments. By the time he retired, he and Grandma owned their house outright, had a substantial investment portfolio, and were living comfortably on their pensions and investment income. Jake, he'd tell me while we sanded wood or balanced his investment spreadsheets. The most important thing about money isn't how much you make, it's how much you keep. And the most important thing about family money is understanding that it can bring out the worst in people. Promise me you'll be smart about anything you inherit. I always thought he was being overly dramatic, but I promised anyway. Grandpa had a way of making you want to live up to his expectations. How naive I was back then. Grandma Ruth was the perfect complement to Grandpa's serious nature. She was warm and funny, always ready with cookies and stories about the old days. But she was also sharp as a tack when it came to reading people. She'd watch Oliver during family gatherings, observing how he'd charm the adults while being dismissive of anyone who couldn't do something for him. "That boy has charisma," she told me once when I was about 16. But charisma without character is dangerous. Your grandfather and I are watching both of you boys closely. When I graduated college with my computer science degree, I moved across the state for a good job at a software development company. Oliver stayed local, bouncing between odd jobs, sales associate at a car dealership, assistant manager at a restaurant, something vague in marketing, and still living in Mom's basement at 24. The distance was good for me. I only had to deal with family drama during holidays and the occasional phone call. I built a good life for myself. The work was challenging and rewarding. I made decent money, and I was finally free from the constant comparisons to Oliver. I dated, made friends, learned to rock climb, and generally enjoyed being an independent adult. During this time, I stayed close to my grandparents, visiting them every few months and calling them weekly. Last year, Grandpa Joe started having health issues. First, it was just fatigue, then some heart irregularities, then a series of small strokes that left him weaker, but still mentally sharp. I visited as often as I could, sometimes driving the 4 hours each way just for a weekend. During one of those visits, while Grandma was napping and we were sitting in his workshop, Grandpa pulled me aside for a serious conversation. "Jake, I need to tell you something important," he said, setting down the piece of wood he'd been examining. "Your grandmother and I have been updating our estate planning, and we want you to know what we've decided." I tried to deflect. "Grandpa, you don't need to worry about that stuff. You and Grandma are going to be around for years." He held up his hand to stop me. "Son Paul, I'm 82 years old and I've had 3 strokes this year. We need to be realistic." His voice was gentle but firm. "We've decided to leave you the house and the majority of our investment accounts." I was stunned. "Grandpa, that's not fair to Oliver. He's family too." "Now, Jake," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "your grandmother and I love Oliver. We really do. But we've been watching both of you for 26 years now, and we've seen how you handle responsibility versus how he handles it." He gestured around his workshop tools, organized perfectly, projects in various stages of completion. "When you come here, you ask how you can help. You listen when I explain how something works. You remember what I teach you and apply it. When Oliver visits, he's polite for about 10 minutes. Then he starts hinting about needing money for this or that. I wanted to defend my brother, but honestly, Grandpa wasn't wrong. "We're not leaving him with nothing," Grandpa continued. "There's a 50,000 savings account that will go to him, plus some family jewelry and keepsakes that belong to my father. But the house and the main investment accounts, that's about 850,000 total. That's going to you." The number took my breath away. I knew my grandparents were comfortable, but I had no idea they had that much wealth. More importantly, Grandpa said, "I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to your grandmother and me, I want you to immediately put everything into a trust. Don't let it sit in your name alone even for a month." Why Grandpa's expression grew serious. "Because I've seen too many families tear each other apart over inheritance. Your mother loves Oliver more than she loves you. Don't look at me like that. We both know it's true. And she'll pressure you to share with him. Put it in a trust where it's protected, and then you can help him in ways that make sense if and when he earns it." "What kind of trust?" "Talk to an estate attorney. There are ways to set it up so you have full use of everything, but the assets themselves are protected from claims or pressure from family members. I've seen too many good kids bullied into giving away their inheritance to irresponsible siblings." That conversation haunted me for weeks. Part of me felt guilty about keeping such a big secret from Oliver and Mom, but part of me remembered all the times I'd watched Oliver blow through money. The $2,000 Mom gave him for car repairs that he spent on a trip to Las Vegas. The $5,000 loan for a business idea that turned out to be some multi-level marketing scheme. The credit cards he'd maxed out and then begged Mom to pay off. Grandpa and Grandma passed away within 6 months of each other. Grandpa went first in January, peacefully in his sleep after another stroke. Grandma followed in March. The doctor said her heart just gave out, but I think she died of loneliness. They had been married for 58 years and were rarely apart for more than a day or two in all that time. Losing them was devastating. These were the 2 people who'd shown me unconditional love and support throughout my life, who'd believed in me when my own mother seemed indifferent to my achievements. Attending their funerals felt like losing my real parents. The will reading was scheduled for a week after Grandma's funeral. I drove down from my apartment dreading having to see Mom and Oliver, but knowing I had to be there. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was an older gentleman who'd known my grandparents for decades. His office was exactly what you'd expect: dark wood leather chairs, walls lined with law books. Mom and Oliver were already there when I arrived, sitting side by side and whispering to each other. They looked up when I walked in, and I caught something in their expressions. Expectation, maybe even excitement. It made me uncomfortable. Mr. Henderson got straight to business. He explained that my grandparents had updated their will just 8 months before Grandpa's death, and everything was clearly laid out. Then he started reading. The house appraised at $650,000. To Jake, the investment accounts totaling approximately $250,000. To Jake, the savings accounts except for one specific account. To Jake, various personal items and keepsakes with specific bequests to family members, but the bulk of everything. To Jake, Oliver got his $50,000 savings account and some specific items. Grandpa's watches, tools, some furniture. Mom got Grandma's jewelry and some personal mementos. The silence in the room was deafening. Oliver was the first to speak, his voice tight with shock. "There must be some mistake." Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses. "I can assure you there's no mistake. Your grandparents were very thorough in their planning." "But this can't be right," Mom said, her voice rising. They would have wanted the boys to share equally. There must be an earlier will, or Mrs. Peterson. Mr. Henderson interrupted gently. Your parents were very specific about their wishes. In fact, they included a letter explaining their reasoning. If you'd like me to read it? Yes, Oliver said immediately. Read it. Mr. Henderson pulled out a separate envelope and opened it carefully. This is in your father's handwriting. He said to Mom, then began to read. To our family, we have made the decision to leave the majority of our estate to our grandson, Jake. This was not an easy choice, but it was a deliberate one. Over the years, we have watched both of our grandsons grow into young men. And while we love them both dearly, we have observed significant differences in their approach to responsibility, money management, and planning for the future. Jake has consistently demonstrated the values we try to instill: hard work, financial responsibility, and genuine concern for others. He has never asked us for money, has worked to support himself through school, and has shown respect for the sacrifices previous generations made to build what we're leaving behind. Oliver, while charming and well-meaning, has not yet developed these same qualities. We hope that receiving a smaller inheritance will motivate him to build these skills, rather than rely on family wealth he has not earned. We trust Jake to use this inheritance wisely and perhaps to help his brother in appropriate ways when Oliver demonstrates he is ready for such help. This decision comes from love for both boys and hope for their futures. The silence after Mr. Henderson finished reading was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall and the muffled sound of traffic outside. Oliver's face had gone through several color changes. White, then red, then an almost purple shade. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. This is ridiculous. Oliver finally exploded. I can't believe they'd write something like that about me. Oliver, I started, but he cut me off. No, don't. Just don't. This is obviously you're doing somehow. You probably talked them into changing their will. That's not how much did you promise them. Did you tell them you'd take care of them in their old age if they left you everything? Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. I can assure you that Jake had no input into your grandparents' estate planning decisions. In fact, they specifically asked that the contents of the will not be discussed with either grandson until after both of them had passed. Mom found her voice. There has to be something we can do. This isn't what they really wanted. Mrs. Peterson, this will was updated 8 months ago. Your parents were both of sound mind. They used their regular attorney, me, and everything was properly witnessed and notarized. There are no grounds for challenging it. The meeting deteriorated from there. Oliver accused me of being manipulative and sneaky. Mom alternated between tears and anger, insisting that surely I would do the right thing and share with my brother. Mr. Henderson tried to maintain order while explaining various legal details. Finally, I stood up. I think we're done here, I said. Mr. Henderson, when can I begin the process of transferring everything? We can start the paperwork this week. Probate will take a few months, but it should be straightforward. Oliver and Mom left without saying goodbye to me. I could hear them arguing in the parking lot, Oliver's voice rising above Mom's attempts to calm him down. That was 3 months ago. In the immediate aftermath, the pressure campaign began almost immediately. Mom called me the next day. Jake, honey, I know you're probably overwhelmed by all this, but I think we need to talk about how to handle the inheritance fairly. It is being handled fairly, I said. Grandpa and Grandma made their wishes very clear. But surely you can see that their decision was influenced by Oliver's youth. He's only 26. He's still figuring out his life. Mom, I'm only 2 years older than him. Yes, but you've always been more serious. Oliver is creative, artistic. He thinks differently about money. He thinks he doesn't need to earn it or be responsible with it. That's not fair, Jake. Oliver has had some setbacks, but he's trying. This became the pattern for our conversations over the next several weeks. Mom would call with a new angle, a new reason why I should voluntarily give Oliver half of everything. He was thinking about going back to school. Surely I could pay his tuition. He wanted to start a business. Surely I could provide startup capital. He was looking at getting married eventually. Surely I could help with a house down payment. Each time I offered to help with smaller, specific amounts for legitimate needs, I could contribute to tuition if he actually enrolled in a degree program and maintained good grades. I could help with a reasonable car if his current one died, but I wasn't handing over hundreds of thousands of dollars for vague future plans. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. My offers were never enough. According to Mom, anything less than a 50-50 split was selfish and contrary to what my grandparents really would have wanted. Oliver tried different approaches. Sometimes he'd be angry, ranting about how unfair the whole situation was. Sometimes he'd try to be buddy-buddy, suggesting we were both victims of our grandparents' poor judgment. Sometimes he'd be pitiful, talking about how hard it was to find a decent place to live or make ends meet. Meanwhile, true to Grandpa's advice, I immediately began the process of moving everything into a trust. I found Sarah Chen, an estate attorney who specialized in asset protection, and explained my situation. "Your grandfather was very smart," she told me during our first meeting. "Family inheritance disputes are more common than people think, and they can get incredibly ugly. Setting up an irrevocable trust will make it nearly impossible for anyone to successfully challenge your ownership or force you to liquidate assets." The trust was complex but brilliant. Legally, I didn't own the house or investment accounts directly. The trust did, but I was the sole beneficiary, which meant I had complete use and control of everything. More importantly, because the assets belonged to the trust, rather than to me personally, they were protected from potential legal claims, creditor issues, or family pressure. Even if someone tried to sue you personally, Sarah explained, they couldn't touch the trust assets. And if family members tried to claim you had promised them money or property, there would be no property in your name for them to claim. The whole process took about 6 weeks and cost me $8,000 in legal fees, but the peace of mind was worth it. I kept the trust completely private. As far as Mom and Oliver knew, I owned everything directly. During this time, I was also dealing with the practical aspects of my inheritance. The house needed some work. Grandpa had maintained it well, but it was built in the 1960s and needed updates. I spent weekends there, planning renovations and slowly moving some of my belongings from my apartment. The investment accounts were substantial, but conservatively managed, mostly index funds and blue-chip stocks. I met with a financial advisor to review everything and make sure the portfolio was appropriate for someone my age. The advisor was impressed with my grandparents' strategy and suggested only minor adjustments. For the first couple of months after probate was finalized, things were tense but manageable. Oliver would make occasional comments about how I should do the right thing and share the inheritance, but nothing too aggressive. Mom would bring it up during every phone call, usually framing it as concern for Oliver's welfare. Then Oliver lost his latest job. Something about showing up late too many times and having attitude problems with customers, and moved back in with Mom full-time. That's when things started escalating dramatically. It started with Mom calling me more frequently, always with a new crisis that supposedly required my financial intervention. Oliver's car broke down and he needed a new one. Could I loan him $15,000? He was thinking about going back to school and needed tuition money. Could I provide $30,000? He wanted to move out of her house but needed money for an apartment deposit and furniture. Could I front him $10,000 each time I offered to help with smaller amounts for specific things? But that was never enough. When I offered to contribute $3,000 toward a reliable used car, Mom got angry because Oliver deserves better than some old junker. When I offered to pay for 1 semester of community college tuition if he enrolled and maintained a B average, she said I was being controlling and treating him like a child. "Jake, you have almost $1 million sitting there that you're not even using," became Mom's favorite line. "Your brother needs help now, not 20 years from now." The pressure ramped up significantly when Oliver started dating this girl, Ashley. Seriously, I'd met her a few times during family gatherings. She seemed nice enough, though a bit naive about Oliver's actual financial situation. Suddenly, Mom was talking about how Oliver needed money to propose properly, to have a nice wedding, to buy a house so he could start his family the right way. The guilt trips became more intense and more frequent. "Your grandparents would be so disappointed to see you hoarding money while your brother struggles," became Mom's favorite attack. That one really got to me because I knew it wasn't true. Grandpa had specifically warned me about this exact situation. About 6 weeks ago, Oliver and Ashley got engaged. The announcement came via a Facebook post showing Ashley's ring. Nothing too expensive, thankfully, because I knew Oliver couldn't afford anything extravagant. Mom called me the next day, practically bubbling over with excitement about the engagement and wedding plans. Then she dropped her real agenda. "Jake, I've been thinking," she said in that overly sweet voice she uses when she wants something big. "Oliver and Ashley are going to need a place to live once they're married, and you've got that big house just sitting there, mostly empty. Why don't you sign it over to Oliver as a wedding gift? You can keep the investment money. But the house would be perfect for them to start their married life." I was so shocked I almost dropped the phone. "Mom, absolutely not. That house is worth over $500,000, and more importantly, it's my home now. I'm not just giving it away." "But you don't even live there full time," she protested. "You're still in your apartment across the state most of the time. The house is just sitting empty." She was partially right about that. I'd been spending weekends at the house and working remotely from there sometimes, but I hadn't made the full move yet. I was taking my time with renovations and trying to decide whether to relocate completely or keep it as a weekend place. "That doesn't matter," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It's my house and I'm not signing it over to anyone. Don't you think you're being a little selfish?" Mom's voice was getting sharper. "Oliver is starting a family. He needs stability. You're a single man with no dependents." What do you need a 4-bedroom house for? What I need it for is none of your business, I snapped. I didn't inherit it to give it away. Grandpa and Grandma left it to me for a reason. Your grandparents never meant for you to keep everything to yourself while your brother struggles, Mom shot back. They would want you to help him. They specifically didn't leave it to him, I reminded her. They had 26 years to change their minds if they wanted to. That call ended with Mom hanging up on me, and I didn't hear from either of them for 2 weeks. Looking back, I should have known they were planning something during that silence. The next contact came from Oliver, surprisingly. He called and asked if he could come visit. Said he wanted to talk to me man-to-man about our relationship and maybe see the house. He sounded more mature than I'd heard him in years, so against my better judgment, I agreed. I figured maybe he was finally ready to accept this situation and move forward. Oliver showed up on a Saturday afternoon with a 6-pack of good beer and what seemed like a genuinely apologetic attitude. He admired the house, asked thoughtful questions about my renovation plans, and actually seemed interested in my work and life for once. We sat on the back porch as the sun set, drinking beer and talking like we hadn't in years. This place is really beautiful, he said, looking out over the backyard where Grandpa's vegetable garden was slowly returning to wild growth. I can see why you love it here. Yeah, it has good memories, I said. I'm planning to restore Grandpa's workshop and maybe get back into woodworking. That's cool. I always liked watching him work out there. Oliver took a long sip of his beer, then turned to me with a serious expression. Jake, I want to apologize for how I've been acting about the inheritance. I was genuinely shocked. This was the most mature thing I'd ever heard Oliver say. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I know it's been hard for everyone. I was hurt and jealous, he continued. I guess I always assumed Grandpa and Grandma would split everything equally. And when they didn't, I felt like they were saying I wasn't good enough or something. Oliver, that's not, let me finish, he said, holding up his hand. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I realize now that they had their reasons for doing things the way they did. Maybe they were trying to teach me something. This was such a complete 180 from his previous attitude that I didn't know how to respond. Here's the thing, though, Oliver continued, and I started to sense the real purpose of his visit. Ashley and I are really struggling to find a place we can afford on my income. And Mom thinks, well, she thinks you might be willing to let us live here. Maybe work out some kind of deal where we pay you rent and build equity over time. There it was. I should have known. Oliver, this isn't a rental property, it's my home. I get that. But hear me out, he said quickly. What if we worked out a lease-to-own situation? We could pay you market rate rent, and after a few years we could buy it from you at whatever price you think is fair. Everyone wins. You get rental income, we get a place to live, and eventually we could own our own home. I could see exactly where this was heading. And what happens when you can't make the payments? What happens when you decide the rent is too high, or you can't qualify for a mortgage when it's time to buy? Oliver got defensive immediately. Why are you assuming I'll fail? I'm not the complete screw-up you think I am. I'm not assuming anything I said. I'm just saying this house isn't for sale or rent. I understand you need a place to live, but this isn't the solution. Then, what is the solution? Oliver's voice was rising. I'm supposed to live with Mom forever. I'm 26 years old, Jake. I want to start my own family, then get a better job, learn a trade, go back to school, build the kind of life that can support a family. With what money? You're sitting on $1 million that should have been split between us, and you won't even help me get started. The conversation went downhill from there. By the time Oliver left, he was back to his old self, muttering about how I was selfish and didn't care about family. The brief glimpse of maturity had been nothing more than a manipulation tactic. That was 3 weeks ago. I didn't hear from Mom or Oliver after that visit, which should have been another red flag. They never stay quiet for that long when they want something. Then last Tuesday happened. I was working from Grandpa's study when I heard a car in the driveway. Mom and Oliver got out, both wearing these weird smug smiles I'd never seen before. They walked right in without knocking. Well, hello there, Jake, Oliver said with a nasty grin. Beautiful day, isn't it? What are you two doing here? Something about their demeanor set off every alarm bell in my head. We came to give you news about the house, Mom said with that same creepy smile. Oliver pulled papers from his jacket and waved them like a victory flag. There was a problem with the estate paperwork. Turns out there was an earlier will that left everything to me. We had the house transferred into my name this morning. I stared at them. That's impossible. Mr. Henderson handled everything. There was no earlier will. Actually, there was, Mom said triumphantly. We found it in Grandma's jewelry box. It's dated 2 years before your will, so legally it supersedes everything. She handed me a folded document that looked official at first glance, supposedly signed by both grandparents, leaving everything to Oliver. I looked at it, then at their faces, and started laughing. The whole situation was so absurd, so obviously fake, that laughter was the only reasonable response. You actually think I'm going to fall for this obvious forgery? Oliver's smile faltered. It's not a forgery. We had our lawyer verify it. What lawyer? That's not important, Mom said quickly. You need to pack and be out by Friday. Oliver and Ashley need to move in before their wedding. Even at first glance, I could see obvious problems. The signatures looked nothing like my grandparents' actual signatures. The paper was wrong. Too new. Wrong. Wait, the legal language read like someone copied text from an online template. Show me the deed transfer, I said. What Mom looked confused. If you really had the house transferred this morning, show me the recorded deed from the courthouse. Show me something from a real lawyer's office. They looked at each other uncertainly. The lawyer said it would take a few days. Oliver said weakly. Right. So you're claiming you found a will that nobody, not the estate attorney, not the probate court, not the title company, noticed for months. And you got the house transferred in one morning without me being notified. Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds when I laid it out like that? Even they seemed to realize how stupid their story was. This is what your grandparents really wanted, Mom said, shifting to her concerned mother voice. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house before I call the police and have you arrested for attempted fraud. This isn't over, Jake. Oliver said, we'll be back Friday with a moving truck. After they left, I called Sarah Chen and emailed her photos of the fake will. She called back within an hour laughing. Jake, this is the most amateurish forgery I've ever seen. They dated it in 2019, but your grandfather's signature includes his new middle initial that he only started using after 2020. Also, the witness signatures appear to be in your mother's handwriting. Sarah suggested we contact police and have someone official present on Friday. People can become irrational about money and property. Friday morning, Sarah arrived with a briefcase full of documents, the original will, probate records, and deed. Deputy Martinez came shortly after, prepared for a volatile confrontation. At 10:30 a.m., we heard a U-Haul rumbling down the street, followed by Mom's car and another car containing Ashley and her parents. They'd brought an audience for their moment of triumph. Oliver jumped out and started directing the movers, then studded to the porch where Sarah, Deputy Martinez, and I waited. He stopped short, seeing the deputy. What's he doing here? Keeping the peace, Deputy Martinez said calmly, and making sure everyone understands the legal situation. The legal situation is that this is my house, Oliver said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Sarah stepped forward. I'm Jake's attorney. Would you like to see the documentation showing your brother is the legal owner? We have a will proving Oliver inherited everything, Mom said. You mean this? Sarah held up their fake will, dated in 2019, but signed with a version of your father's signature he didn't start using until 2020, where the witness signatures match your handwriting, Mrs. Peterson. Mom went white. Oliver looked sick. Attempting to use forged documents to claim property is a felony, Deputy Martinez said firmly. The movers started backing toward their truck. Ashley and her parents were having a heated discussion in their car. Sarah handed the real will to Deputy Martinez. This property legally belongs to Jake Peterson. Any attempt to remove his possessions would constitute criminal trespassing. This isn't fair, Oliver said weakly. I'm the one starting a family. Sarah read sections from Grandpa's letter, explaining their reasoning for the inheritance distribution. The silence was deafening. Oliver looked devastated. They really said that about me. They hoped you'd grow into the person they knew you could be, I said. Ashley finally got out and walked over, looking mortified. Oh, you told me your grandparents left you the house. You said your brother was stealing it. I deserved it more, Oliver said desperately. You lied to me, Ashley said quietly. She turned to me. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Deputy Martinez addressed Oliver and Mom. I could arrest you both for attempted fraud. However, if you acknowledge your mistake and Jake doesn't press charges, we might handle this without jail time. I don't want anyone arrested, I said. But no more fake documents, no more showing up at my house. Ashley walked back to Oliver. The engagement is off, she said, pulling off her ring. Ashley, please. I can't marry someone who lies to me and tries to steal from his brother. She handed him the ring and left with her parents. Oliver turned to me with tears in his eyes. I've lost everything. You've lost things you never actually had. I said, if you want a relationship with me, start with respect and honesty. I'll help you go to community college, get your own apartment when you have a job, but I'm not giving you hundreds of thousands to waste. I don't know how to be the person Grandpa wanted me to be. Then learn. It's not too late, but you have to try. Surprisingly, it stuck. Oliver moved out of Mom's house, got his own apartment, and found work at a landscaping company. I moved into the house full-time, sometimes sitting in Grandpa's study, remembering his warning about family money bringing out the worst in people. I was right, but he was also right about being prepared.